So, my name is Ole Nydahl. I'm a Danish Lama. I got involved with Tibetan Buddhism in '68, spent several years in the Himalayas, and among the things I learned was the process of death and dying, and I would like to teach you about that. It's probably the area where Tibetan Buddhism has had the greatest amount of insight to contribute to the modern world. I'm fully aware that it is a confidence stretcher, to sit here and tell freely about things which all other religions, just put under the table or say we hope or we pray or we dream and so on. But Tibetan Buddhism has some very special knowledge about the psychological processes that happens both during the period of dying, during the period of reconstruction after death, when the subconscious impressions come up because there are no longer any sense impressions being received from the outside, and then the following into another life. The reason I can give this lecture is first that my own teacher, the first incarnate Lama of Tibet, called the Karmapy, that he gave extensive teachings on this. Secondly, that we have the written the written material called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Thirdly, that I've given more than 23,000 people around the world the teaching called Powa, where I've taught them how to die consciously and send their mind from the top of their head into a pure land. Things I teach them to train first and which will then happen automatically when they die. Also, I belong to the people who have memories from my last life. Right back from my childhood, I've been dreaming of protecting men in ladies' clothes, of course monks in red ladies' clothes. I also remember the color in mountain areas which were very far from Denmark, which had absolutely nothing to do with Denmark, and fighting Chinese who were actually trying to attack eastern Tibet at that time. I remember the uniforms, the weapons, everything. So I'm also myself recognized as being, a Buddhist protector, somebody who appears at certain times and places when the lineage needs a boost or something like that, or some protection, and this is my basis, for my own basis for giving this teaching. Also, some dead people have come to me after they died, and also here everything ties in with the information. So I'm not what you can say, I'm not an actor, having read an interesting book, and now passing on some things to you like that. What I'm giving you here is the essence of my own experience. It's what I work with, and it's what I share around the world. So, I usually don't say very much about myself, because, everybody's interesting in their own way. That's one reason. And another one is that it's more important with the package, with the content than with the package. The teaching is more important than the teacher, I think. But anyway, where it is really a confidence, a confidence stretcher, where it's really a question of me telling you something you have not heard before and which you cannot find from any other source, then I should spend a little bit of time on myself, because the benefit you'll have from the lecture will correspond with the amount of confidence which you have in me as the one who brings the message. So generally, in order to understand about death and rebirth, we have to look at the nature of mind, because of course it's the mind it happens to. And mind very clearly has two aspects. It has that which knows and that which is known. And that which knows, the open, clear, limitless space of mind, of course, is never reborn. This is like the space or the ocean. It's always the same. It has no beginning and no end. But people don't experience that. They don't see the sky. They see all the clouds coming and going. And this stream of conditioned experiences of body and speech and mind, which we identify with, at a certain time, this stops. There are quick deaths, like an accident or stepping on a mine in a warm country or something like that. Or there are slow deaths like AIDS and cancer, which just go on, like that. But under all circumstances, whether it happens quickly or slowly, certain conditions come together when mind and body separate. If we take a medium time death, like a normal 2-week death from the stroke till finished, or from bad cancer is seen till one dies or whatever else, right? I mean, if we look at medium time, then what we will see is first that the dying person is actually losing, the control of the body. The solid things don't work anymore. One cannot move very well. The second thing is mouth and nose run, means one lost control of the fluid aspect. Then the body heat begins to contract from the extremities into the center of the body. Then one's breathing becomes disturbed and unclear, and during this whole process, one has been going in and out all the time of consciousness. Sometimes people are awake, then they're gone, then they're awake again, like that. So this is the process of dying. What happens on a physiological level is actually that an energy which used to be spread over the whole body begins to condense into the center of the body, into the central channel, which runs from a place 8 fingers behind the original hairline on the top back of our head, down through the center of the body to a place 4 fingers below the navel, in the bottom of the body, here, in this place, in between. Here is the central plus-minus axis, the energy channel through the body, and at a certain time, all the energies will move into that central channel. And when they are in there, then one will first feel, one will breathe out 3 times very deeply. The 3rd time one will not breathe in again, and then people will say, who is dead? He's dead now. And actually, it doesn't mean that one must necessarily be dead at that time, because people have been called back with electroshocks and stuff like that. But anyway, at a certain time, people will die. And then, at that time, certain processes will happen. First, the white energy from the top of our head, which actually appeared with the sperm of our father when we were made many years ago. This begins to move through the center of the body towards the heart, and there are different things that happen at that time. One sees a clear light like a moonlight. One hears a sound like hung, moving down through the body. One loses 33 feelings which come from anger, and one's mind becomes exceedingly clear. People who would diet for up to 4 or 5 minutes, where the brain could still be saved and who could tell afterwards, they actually also claim that. They talk about moving through a tube towards the light and remembering beings they've been with before and stuff like that. So about 5 minutes into the death process, we can follow the teachings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the other thing. Only if people are resuscitated after 5 minutes, so much brain damage already happened that they can't tell us anything, or very little. But anyway, that is clear. So it takes 10 to 15 minutes from the energy from the top of the head to appear at the center of the heart in the middle of our body. This is the first motion. Then the red energy moves up from 4 fingers below the navel, in the center of the body. And that's the red energy which appeared from our mother. It was from the egg. It was in the egg of our mother, when the sperm and the egg came together and became the billions of cells that are our bodies today. So this red energy then moves up also during 10 to 15 minutes, and we see a warm red light like a setting sun. We get we hear a sound like ah moving up through the body. We lose 40 feelings which come from attachment and greed and expectations, and we actually do lose and we do experience intense joy, and I mean mega joy, big joy, really strong joy. So at that time, 20 to 30 minutes after death, when the energy has to come together at heart center in the middle of the body, first everything becomes black. And it's black for a moment while 7 feelings appearing from ignorance disappear. And when they have gone, then the immense radiance and power and energy of the mind is totally aware at one time and one place, and one experiences a very, very powerful light. And there, if one was able to be aware during one's dreams, know that one was dreaming, if one can keep a good level of awareness now, if one has a good conscience because one has not, playing funny games during life, but one has, really held life and made it meaningful, then in that case there is a possibility to really experience that clear light. All separation between space and energy, inside and outside, fall away. There is no separation into past, present and future, and that is full enlightenment. We had that example with the 16th Karmapa, who knew a year and a half before his death when he would die. He told that to my wife Hannah and myself. And after that we went out there with our students, and he shrunk his body from he was as big as I am, and more broad, more solid. And he shrunk himself down to this form, to this size, with the head about 2/3 of the normal size and the rest of the body like a child. I looked through the window into the box. There was no doubt. So after he was burned, his heart jumped out of the oven to all of us who were standing there, especially in front of the great Lama Ole Nydahl Rinpoche, there in Sikkim when he was burned, and everything else happened after that. So this Karmapa, he was somebody who really knew what it was about. He really knew and knew very, very well what about mind, so his mind just stayed in his body. In the other cases, and when people cannot hold that clear light, when they lied too often and sold themselves cheaply too often and so on, when they cannot handle that, then people become unconscious. And what happens at that time is that one will then be unconscious for about 3 days. It's actually the only point where my own observations and the Tibetan Book of the Dead do not correspond. Tibetan Book of the Dead says the unconsciousness after death is 3.5 to 4 days. And in my own case, all the people who came to me after their death, like my mother and others, they always came 68 hours after their death. 68 hours after that they were there, completely transparent, but looking exactly the way they should. And okay, then when one has sent them on to a pure land, one is very happy, and one, doesn't know where to go because of gratitude. It's a great thing. But at the same time also, I must admit there is this discrepancy. And I think it's because the people who came to me were educated big city people, and probably farmers and nomads, it will take longer, right? The shock of dying and the sleep at night and stuff like that will simply be longer. The processes of mind will be slower and more long-lasting. It's the only explanation I can give. So when one wakes up from the process of dying there about 3 days after death, first for a whole week one does not know that one is dead. One does not know, and one doesn't want to know. Even if the body is lying there, one just wants to get away as quickly as one can. And there then comes a very confused week, where one still believes one is in one's old body. It's like a habitual body. Everything is like a late afternoon, a bit hazy, and wherever one thinks one is. One thinks of Greenland, there's an ice bear. One thinks of India, there's a holy cow, or whatever, wherever you look, that's it. Thinks of Germany, there's the Autobahn, or whatever, right? Wherever you think, that's what there is. So at that time, then very easily, one will discover, hey, one will just flitter from one thing to another. One will go to one's friends and family and everybody and try to say, hey, what's going on? And one will be amazed that they sit on us when we sit in a chair. One will be amazed that they always go away when one starts talking to them, and so on. But only after about a week does one really discover, hey, I must be dead. There again one goes in front of a mirror or does something else, and then one says, hey, one really discovers there is no solid body, there is nothing there I can call me. So then that is such a big shock, about 10 days after death, that one becomes unconscious again. And from this unconsciousness then one moves into a state where the subconscious appears. Actually a state where the sequence of experiences from last life, the surface consciousness from last life is stopped, and here the subconscious comes up. The impressions that were there before, they come up, and they come up in a very powerful way, And gradually they begin to become our life. Here, for instance, there is there are different feelings that may come up as being dominant. It's possible pride may be dominant, and then a world corresponding to pride appears, beautiful palaces or artistic beauty or even, abstract beauty or abstract clarity appears. It's also possible that, jealousy may be strongest, and then weapon chambers and things to get and battlefields and stuff like that will appear. It's also possible desire is strongest. In that case, we will see our future parents making love. We'll go between them, we'll unite with the fertilized egg in the womb of the mother, and we'll move into another human birth. It's also possible, and people may not like to hear that, but I can't improve Buddha's teachings because some don't like to hear it. It is also possible, if we lied a lot, if we told a lot of stories, if we stopped other people's development, that we will be so confused after we die that we try to hide between stones and bushes. And then if some animals come there and start making love, it's possible we go between them and we come out with 4 legs and a nice fur coat for the next life, at least for one. I'm sorry to have to say that. I know it disturbs people in the West, but I can't change the teaching because it disturbs people. Then there's also another thing that can happen, that is that jealousy and greed is the strongest feeling. Then one goes into a state of very strong, frustration where nothing is satisfied. And it's also possible that hate and anger were the strongest feelings, and we should really wish beings that that's not the case. Because when that anger comes up, when those feelings come up, you don't want to be in their skin, you don't want to have their minds, they really suffer. So, all of these things are like dreams. A nice experience when we die is like going to a nice holiday, and enjoying whatever we earned. A difficult time after death is like, going to the basement and scrubbing the potatoes and waiting, and paying off the debt. And at some time or other, one comes back into the human life again, where the teachings I gave on karma, my video on karma, is very useful because it tells how that works on. How, due to impressions we planted in our mind in a former life, we have certain experiences when we die, pleasant or unpleasant, and when again human, a certain body, a certain country or, suburb or ghetto, right, and certain tendencies and wishes and so on. And this then leads us into the next life. So the thing to understand is that all this has been going on always. That's the most important thing. Nobody made it. It was always like that. Our mind is like space. It wasn't created, it cannot die, nobody put it together, it can't fall apart. And it's always been playing with itself like that. And every time we look, there are suffering. There is suffering in different places. And that's why we advise people to look for the Pure Land, exemplified by the Buddha of limitless light behind me. This form on the Tibetan scroll, which is behind me right now, is actually the Buddha of limitless light called Upame. It is a state of greatest bliss, and it is obtained by taking all our ordinary desires and wishes and transforming them into the wish for enlightenment for the good of all beings.
Lama Ole, how in life can we prepare for death?
I would say that the best thing to do is to start where we are, with our ordinary understanding of the universe, and just try to realize that mind is not created by the brain but transformed by the brain. That the brain is not the radio station but the radio, that mind, like information, is inherent in space. If people can understand that, then they can also understand that mind is not dead when the brain is dead and falls away, and that should be the basis. This very materialistic understanding that mind is not created by the brain but works through the brain. And then, when we have that, I would actually advise, if it's in any way possible, to come to one of my Powa courses, course, it sounds stupid that a Lama sits there and makes advertisement for himself and his own courses and his own tapes, on his own videotapes. But still, I would like to mention it because I've now given it to 23,000 people around the world, and I have seen it benefit them. I've actually seen people go through their fear of death. I've seen them learn how to die, and even though very, very few of my students have died, then those who died were able to go very, very well after they had learned the powa. It's a Tibetan practice, a secret Tibetan practice. I don't think it exists outside the Tibetan culture, where you learn to meditate on sending your awareness from the top of your head, right into the heart of the Buddha behind. You let the Buddha appear above you. You let your mind appear as a certain meditation in your heart, and you send it up there, and you mix in there. And after, well, very often already at the first practice or otherwise inside 2-3 days, everybody develops a physical sign on the top of their head, a small cut, a small hole, a small blood spot or something like that, as a sign that the connection through the body is now open, and it means that when the time comes to die, one can do it on automatic pilot. In Europe, when I give these practices as 1,100 people, I need binoculars to see my last students down there in the hall. In the English-speaking world, where we have not, where we have not done so much work yet, and the groups are smaller and so on, actually there are not so many. But anyway, I really would advise whoever wants to handle the thing of death and be able to make the rest of their lives into a gift because the big problems have been handled, I would advise them to go and learn, come to one of my powa courses or one of my colleagues, also other lamas who teach. I would advise that. I would consider that very meaningful. Be a weight off your back. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.